Alright, this topic is about a trig piece of content called angle of elevation and angle of depression. I'm going to assume that you already know how to find the trig ratios, that you already know how to find an angle given two sides of a right triangle, and that you also know how to find a side measure given an angle and a side of a right triangle. Those should have all been introductory topics that you've covered before you hit this one. I have videos on both of those, so you can look back for those if you need them. And no snickering at my pathetic drawings, because, yeah, I am not an artist by any stretch. Alright, let's just say that we have a house here, and let's say that we have a ladder, and it reaches up here on the house, and that's going to be 15 feet high from the bottom of the house, or from the ground. And let's say that we know that the safe, and I don't know if this is true, but I'm just going to make this up. Let's say that OSHA or whatever safety people are, they're going to tell us that for the ladder to be safe against the side of the house, this angle has to be 38 degrees. I honestly don't know what that is, but we're just going to say 38 degrees. So we need to find out the size of the ladder to use so that we can reach up 15 feet high. So we're going to say that is this is how the problem's set up. Got a house, got a ladder. We need to know the size of the ladder so that it can reach 15 feet up, and we know that the safety angle so that the ladder doesn't tip or we don't fall backwards on it is 38 degrees. The way that the problem is going to be worded is they're going to tell you that the 38 degrees is the angle of and this is my symbol for angle of elevation. It's just the way that from the ground up, it's elevated the ladder. So if the ladder was laying on the ground, we elevated it or lifted it up 38 degrees. So that's kind of what we're learning, is like, what do these angle of elevation, angle of depression look like? So once we know that 38 degrees is the angle of elevation, and how big a ladder do we need? We will solve the problem. My method for solving these trig ratios are pretty standard. I use it over and over again because it works. I'm really just going to focus on this part of my picture, and I'm going to label up that right triangle. So here's my reference angle, and then straight across from that is going to be the opposite side to that angle. I'm just going to label it OPP. The right angle was down here in my right triangle, and if I go straight across, the X is where my hypotenuse is. And I do have one more leg. This here would be called the adjacent, but since I don't have a number and I'm not looking for it, I'm going to ignore that completely. If you've done any trig, you have probably heard of SOHCAHTOA, and I use that to figure out which trig ratio I need to use for this problem. In our problem, we have the hypotenuse labeled, and we know the opposite. So I want the trig function that uses O and H. So as I go across SOHCAHTOA, sine does have O and H. That's the one that I need. These two do not have O and H. They have A and H and O and A. So I'm going to start with my trig equation. The sine of an angle equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. And now let's plug in our numbers. Our angle measure is 38 degrees. Our opposite measures 15 from the label that we have on our picture. The hypotenuse we don't know is x. So now we're ready to solve. The x only occurs once. Everything else is a number. The sine of 38 we can actually get right out of our calculator. So you find the sine button, type in 38, hit equal, and I'm going to round that to 4 decimal places. 6157. This one we have the x in the bottom, so it just means we have an extra step when we go to solve. We want to get that x, whatever's in the bottom of that fraction, we always want to get it out of the bottom, and the way that we do that is to multiply. So I'm going to multiply, which cancels out the x, and I have to multiply that side by x. So when I rewrite, I have 6157x equals 15. It looks ugly just because of the long decimal, but don't let that freak you out. Just say what is going on between the x and the 6.6157. It's multiplication, and we need to undo that, so we're going to divide. Looks really ugly, doesn't it? These will cancel out. What I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other. And then I grab my handy-dandy calculator again. 15 divided by 0.6157 equals, sorry, I had to write down here, I ran out of space. X is going to equal 24 0.363. And that's going to be feet. So I know that to be a safe person and use the right angle of elevation for my ladder, I need a ladder that's about 24 or 25 feet tall. And that way I can reach safely up to something that's 50. So maybe I have a window repair on that house that's 15 feet high. So that could be something that happens. All right, let's look at another one of these. And then this time, let's see, we're going to say that this time we have a building. Again, no laughing. I'll try using black. And then it's we have the sun up here. I know it's beautiful. And we're just going to say that the angle of depression, again, that kind of sounds really scary, of the sun, we'll say is 57 degrees. And we can say that it casts a shadow on the ground. Whoops. I can spell. Shadow on the ground. And we'll say that the shadow is cast a shadow on the ground. We'll say that the building is 99 feet tall. How long is the shadow? Okay, so in our picture, let's put some things in. We know that this building here is 99 feet tall. That goes from here to there. We know that this here is the shadow. We are looking for that, right? How long is the shadow on the ground? So I'm going to call that X. And now here's the angle of depression. That's the whole reason why we're doing this. Think of the sun is gonna have its rays going straight out. And what happens is it gets depressed or pushed downwards so that we get the shadow. And so this here is actually the angle of depression, right here. All right, that is 57 degrees. Well, notice that it doesn't help our picture out, right? We need somewhere in this right triangle here to have an angle besides the right angle. So here's the key about angle of depression. The angle of depression, because the sun makes a parallel line with the ground, like the sun if it was shining straight out, this 57 will also equal this 57. They have to be congruent to each other because it's just one of the laws of parallel lines. What some kids do or students do is they just say, you know what, anytime I see the angle of depression, I know that if I was going to label an angle of elevation, it would be in the same spot because they are congruent to each other. So then we can just follow our same problem-solving technique. We have a right triangle. Let's label it up. So we have our reference angle. Based on our triangle, this guy here opposite the right angle is our hypotenuse. Opposite our reference angle, that is our opposite. And that means that our shadow, or our X at the bottom, this guy here, is the adjacent. So I need to figure out which trig function. So I'm going to write down SOHCAHTOA. And based on our picture, we have the opposite, we have the adjacent. So one of our trig functions has to use O and A. Sine does not use O and A. Cosine does not use O and A. Look at that, we got a winner. So tangent of the angle equals opposite over adjacent. Let's put things in. Our angle measure was 57. Our opposite we've already got labeled, that's 99. Our adjacent is X. So now we need to solve it. So I need to get my calculator and type in tangent of 57. There's the tangent button, 57 equals, and that becomes 1.5399. I'm rounding that to 4 decimal places. All right, the X is in the bottom of the fraction this time. I need to get it out. It is dividing, so I'm going to multiply. All right, so now I have 1.5399 equals, let me see if I can slide that up a little bit. Sorry, 1.5399x equals 99. And what we're going to do, I'm sorry, I'm just feeling like that's wicked messy. So I want to erase that. Okay, retry. We have 1.5399x equals 99. How do we get the x by itself? Well, it's attached to the 1.5399 by multiplication, so we have to undo that multiplication by dividing. And again, it's common sense in a way if you've done algebra, but it just looks really ugly because of those decimals. And when I see division problems like this, thank God we can use calculators on them, because that does not look like fun. So let's say 99 divided by 1.5399, and our x is going to equal 64.29. So we know that the shadow of, so let's say we wanted to set up a gazebo or a lawn chair, granted in real life you just wing it, but let's say you needed to figure out, maybe we're going to install something along here, so you wanted it to be in the shade, maybe some impatience because those plants need shade, so you want to find out how long that shadow is. And you would know that you would have a 64.3 foot shadow, which gives you a lot of space to plant or whatever you were going to do in there, but that might be good knowledge for you to have. So, alright, well that's one example of each of those types of problems, and I think that's probably long enough for now.